Good morning. Thank you very much for coming. We're delighted to see so many of you here on a July morning. We're here to mark the launch of the UK's Persecution of Christians Review, which has been done by the Bishop of Truro, the Anglican Bishop of Truro, Bishop Philip Mount Stephen. It's being launched simultaneously at this very minute in London. And we are holding this event in Rome because Rome is so full of people who know firsthand about this issue. And we thought it would be a great opportunity to have a discussion about the issue of persecution of and discrimination against Christians. So that's why we're here. I hope you've all got the programme for the morning, but we're going to start with Don Angelo Romano is going to say a few words of welcome. Then Monsignor Camilleri is going to speak on behalf of the Vatican, and then we're going to have a panel discussion with our three expert speakers. So Cardinal Sacco from Iraq, Father Bonnie Mendes from Pakistan, and Sister Monica Chikwe from Nigeria. And they're going to tell us about the situation of Christians in their countries, and importantly, they're going to give us their views on what we as the international community can do to support them and make the situation of Christians better. And we will also have a discussion, so I hope that you will join in the discussion, because I know there are many people in the audience who are also very expert on this issue. So that's the programme for the morning. I'm going to start by handing over to Don Angelo Romano, who is going to tell us, I hope, why we're here.
Thank you. Dear Ambassador, Beatitude, Excellencies, distinguished guests. It's an honor for me to open this meeting organized by the United Kingdom Embassy to the Holy See to launch the UK Independent Review on Persecution of Christians. I welcome you to this basilica, sanctuary for the new martyrs. Here, the community of Sant'Egidio prays every day and welcome all the pilgrims and visitors from all over the world coming here to visit the memories of martyrs of our time. Ambassador, this is a very well-chosen venue for this occasion. The Basilica of San Bartolomeo is now the sanctuary dedicated to the new Christian martyrs. How this happened? The Basilica was founded in 997 by Emperor Otto III to honor two important martyrs, Bartholomew the Apostle and Adalbert, a well-known martyr killed while he was in mission preaching the gospel in Poland. The Basilica was built to keep the bodies of these two important martyrs. In 1993, the Basilica was entrusted to the care of the community of Sant'Egidio. University and high school students of the community now gather in the Basilica for liturgy and prayer, using the surrounding halls and rooms for their activities in favor of the poor. The community is well known for its commitment to ecumenism, and along the years, the Basilica has become the focus of several initiatives with representatives and believers from the various Christian denominations. In 1999, anticipating the celebration of the Jubilee of 2000, Pope John Paul II created a commission to the study of the life and history of the new Christian martyrs of the 20th century. For 2 years, the commission worked in the Basilica of San Bartolomeo, collecting approximately 12,000 dossiers on martyrs and witnesses of faith from all over the world. Among the fruits of this study was the ecumenical prayer at the Colosseum, when the Pope gathered with several representatives of various Christian churches during the Jubilee celebration. The event revealed that the multitude of Christian believers killed or persecuted in the last century is like a continent still waiting to be explored, a heritage that all the Christian denominations share. As Pope Francis said, meeting the Coptic Orthodox Patriarch, the blood of the many martyrs of all the churches has become the seed of Christian unity. After the Jubilee, John Paul II wished that the memory of the witnesses of faith of the 20th and the 21st century were made visible in the Basilica of San Bartolomeo, in this place. in October 2002, a solemn ecumenical ceremony took place with Cardinal Ruini, Cardinal Casper, Cardinal George from Chicago, and Patriarch Theoctist of the Romanian Orthodox Church. They blessed this big icon dedicated to the martyrs of the 20th century, which is behind us, and was placed on a high altar, depicted the personal stories of the martyrs studied by the Commission, arranged according to the symbology of the Book of Revelation. Relics, objects, belongings to some of the martyrs are placed in the small side chapels around you, each one dedicated to a specific historical circumstances. One chapel is dedicated to the martyrs of Europe, another one martyrs of Africa, another one Asia, Oceania and Middle East, another one America, and two chapels are dedicated to the martyrs who suffered under the persecution of the two ideologies who more persecuted the Christians, Nazism and communism. So in all these years from 2000, we received more than 120 relics and memories of new martyrs from all the Christian denominations. Some of them will soon be exposed in our medieval crypt. So I think that today's initiative has a great value to unveil the stories of so many Christians in the world persecuted in our times. As Pope Francis said, visiting this basilica, the living legacy of martyrs gives us peace and unity today. They teach us that with the power of love, with weakness, one can fight against arrogance, violence, and war, and one can bring about peace with patience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don Angelo. Before we get into the presentations, I thought it might help if I tell you what is in the review. The review is available on the internet. If you Google UK Persecution of Christians review, it comes up. But it is 130 pages long, so I thought I'd give you a little bit of a summary so that you know what it says. So, as I said, the review was commissioned by the British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, and he asked the Bishop of Truro to map global persecution of Christians and to assess the quality of the British Foreign Office's response. So it's an independent review that looks at what we as the Foreign Office do about the persecution of Christians. And therefore, it doesn't represent government policy. It was written by the Bishop of Truro, but it's his advice to the British government. And I hope we can, in the discussion, extrapolate from that to talk about how the international community can support persecuted Christians. So I'll just tell you briefly what the report says. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bishop's introductory remarks because I think they're quite important. The Bishop, at the beginning of his report, addresses the question of why look at the persecution of Christians? Why not look just at the persecution of all religious minorities? And he feels that it's justified to look at the persecution of Christians for a number of reasons. And those include, the first one is that he points out that Christianity today is a religion, a phenomenon of the global south and the global poor. He thinks that one reason why we in the UK are a bit diffident about talking about Christianity and standing up for Christians is that we think of it as a European religion and we have our post-colonial guilt with us. But he points out that the persecution of Christians is something that happens mainly in the global south and to the global poor. So that's the first point. He says that persecution of Christians is a global phenomenon. It happens everywhere, and therefore he thinks it merits being looked at. And his third major reason is that the treatment of Christian minorities is a bellwether for how all minorities are treated. So if Christians suffer, that usually goes together with the abuse of human rights more generally. And he also says that Christians tend to speak truth to power, which can make them a particular focus of persecution. But he makes very clear that freedom of religion and belief, the universal human right, is for all, for everyone, as he says, without fear or favor. And he mentions the major abuses of people who've suffered for their religion, for other religions, such as the Rohingya in Myanmar, the Yazidis in Iraq, and the Uyghur Muslims in China. He also recognizes that in the past, and to some extent the present, Christians have been responsible for perpetrating persecution themselves. So that's very important context, I think, for the review. Then he goes on to say how he's defining persecution of Christians, and he's defined it, in the absence of a standard definition, he's defined it as discriminatory treatment accompanied by threats of violence. And he says that the types of persecution vary enormously, so ranging from the bombing of churches, for example, in Egypt and India, to the kidnapping of Christian girls in Pakistan and Nigeria, to the prevention of freedom of worship in Saudi Arabia and the Maldives, or misuse of the blasphemy laws in Pakistan. So everything from violence and murder to discrimination and exclusion. He points out that persecution often correlates to social exclusion, and that in Pakistan, for example, the Christian minority is also economically marginalized. Then he gives some quite startling figures. He says persecution is on the rise, and that Christians are the group most persecuted for their religion in the world. He says 80% of persecuted believers are Christians. And in 2016, Christians were targeted in 144 countries. And he reports that Open Doors, which is an NGO who worked with the bishop on this report, estimates that anti-Christian oppression affects 245 million people. And the causes, I think, as he draws out in the report, are partly aggressive nationalism, partly a rise of Islamist extremism, and partly Christians being persecuted for speaking the truth and therefore being targeted by organized crime and by criminal groups. The main part of the first part of the report goes on to look at persecution of Christians on a regional basis. And I'm just going to give you one or two examples because they are also striking. So the bishop says that in the Middle East and North Africa, as I'm sure Cardinal Sacco is going to tell us more about this, the Christian population has declined from 20% a century ago to less than 4% today, and that the rise of radical ideologies has increased intolerance of Christians. In South Asia, the growth of militant nationalism and also Islamist extremism has seen discrimination and also violent attacks. Most shockingly, the 259 people killed in the attacks in churches in Sri Lanka this Easter. And that attacks on Christians are often compounded by a lack of access to justice afterwards. In sub-Saharan Africa, he focuses on Nigeria, which has the double problem of Boko Haram, but also violence perpetrated by Fulani herdsmen against Christians. And he says that in 2018, far more Christians were killed for their faith in Nigeria than anywhere else in the world. And he says it's 90% of the total, which is striking because that does not get very much press coverage. And he says that 200,000 Nigerian Christians are currently at risk from Boko Haram. In East Asia, he says that North Korea is the most dangerous country in the world for Christians, who are considered hostile to the state and are subject to arrest, torture, and even execution. And he also focuses on Latin America, surprisingly, as a continent in which many countries are majority Christian. But he says that in Latin America, churches are often targeted because of the strength of their leaders' opposition to paramilitary organizations and criminal gangs, for example, in Mexico and Colombia. And he points out that in Mexico, 45 priests and 1 cardinal were murdered between 1990 and 2017, making Mexico the most dangerous country in which to be a priest. So there are many, many more examples in the report, but I've just picked out some of the most striking examples and statistics. He then goes to look at some case studies, so some instances of persecution of Christians, and in particular he looks at how the Foreign Office has responded. And he covers the world geographically, so I'm not going to relay all of those to you, but they're there in the report if you want to look at them. And then from all of this, after that he surveyed every British embassy in the world, and he asked us all how we responded to persecution of Christians. So we all filled in a questionnaire, and he draws some conclusions from that, and also from the evidence he's taken from independent observers, from NGOs, but also representatives of the Christian faiths. And again, there's a long list of conclusions in the report, and also a long list of recommendations. So I'm going to tell you some of the recommendations. Some of them are about the Foreign Office structures, which maybe aren't so much of interest, but I can tell you a little bit about them. So he recommends that the UK should articulate the aspiration to be a global leader on defending freedom of religion and belief, and that we should embed that in our values, in a diplomatic code. He says we should name the phenomenon of persecution of Christians and systematically gather reliable information on abuses. He says we should map the crossover between persecution of Christians or people for their faith and other abuses of human rights, but also the link to lack of security and lack of economic development. He suggests that we make the position of Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion and Belief, which we have. Our Special Envoy is Lord Ahmed, that we make it permanent and that we embed structures within the civil service to support that. He thinks we should be able to respond immediately to atrocity crimes and impose sanctions against perpetrators. He recommends that we put funding aside for protecting freedom of religion and belief. He says we should train all Foreign Office staff in religious literacy, particularly when they're going to countries in which that is particularly important, and require them to report back on freedom of religion and belief, and to develop a tailored response to violations. He thinks we should include people of minority religions in our local recruitment in embassies, and that the Foreign Office should chair a board on this issue to take the issue out to Whitehall, because some of the issues are, for example, about how aid is used. He thinks we should consult systematically with NGOs, establish a Forbes scale of persecution, and actively mark every year the UN International Day commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief. And finally, he recommends that we seek a UN resolution on the protection of Christians in the Middle East. Now, the Foreign Secretary, as I said, is launching this review at this moment in London, and my understanding is that he's going to accept all of those conclusions, but we can check that afterwards and see what he's actually said. But that is my understanding. So that's it. That's what's in the review. I just thought it would be helpful if I outlined that. And now, I'm going to hand over to Monsignor Antoine Camilleri, who's going to talk to us about the position of the Vatican. Monsignor Camilleri, as you know, is Under-Secretary for Relations with States at the Vatican. He's Maltese, and he's a member of the Vatican's diplomatic service. He served in Papua New Guinea, Uganda, and Cuba. And we're delighted he's here to present the Holy See position. Monsignor Camilleri.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Your Eminence, Your Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I am grateful for the invitation and pleased to have this opportunity to offer some brief remarks on the alarming reality on the persecution of Christians, an issue that, as the interim report prepared by the Right Reverend Philip Mount Stephen indicates, is becoming ever more widespread and urgent. Today's initiative is a tangible example of the growing concern over the problem of discrimination and persecution because of religious belief, and of the determination to help bring greater awareness, in particular to the tragic situation of Christians in many parts of the world, and to strive to overcome what Pope Francis has described as a sort of genocide caused by general and collective indifference. It is fitting, although perhaps not so much in a felicitous way, that we are holding the Rome launch of the Persecution of Christians Review in this basilica named in honor of the Apostle Bartholomew, who, as you may know, was himself a victim of religious persecution, suffering martyrdom on account of his Christian faith by, according to legend, being flayed and then beheaded. At the outset, I would like to underscore that unjust discrimination, violence, and persecution of any innocent human being, and especially on the basis of religion and belief, is morally unacceptable and reprehensible. Over the past several years, we have witnessed attacks upon individuals and groups of various religious backgrounds by terrorists, extremist groups, and religious fanatics who have no respect for the lives of those who have beliefs different from their own. Given this tragic reality, we cannot ignore the fact that religious persecution in the broader context is experienced by a variety of religious communities, groups, and individuals in many parts of the world. Sadly, most of these crimes seem to continue with impunity and with little more than a shameful blush from the international community, and very often with scarce attention being given to it. Naturally, for the Holy See, the disturbing reality of religious persecution is of grave concern, not only for those Christians that suffer, but also for members of any religious conviction. Such persecution is an assault on the most fundamental freedom of the human person, namely, the ability to adhere freely and without fear of persecution to a religion. To be sure, the plight of Christians suffering torture and death is particularly distressing for those of us who also share with them a deep spiritual bond. Although international law stipulates that states bear the primary duty for protecting their own citizens, it is also crucial to recognize the important responsibility of religious leaders to promote peaceful coexistence through mutual dialogue and understanding, so that their communities and their followers respect those of different religious backgrounds rather than foment aggression and violence. A good example of such an active and vocal collaboration among religious leaders may be found in the joint declaration signed in Abu Dhabi this past 4th February by Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmad al-Tayyib, on human fraternity. One of the many notable points elaborated in that text may provide us with a very precise, surgically precise, if I may say, glimpse into the present reality of persecution based on religion and belief. Together, Pope Francis and the Grand Imam, and I quote here from the document, resolutely declare that religions must never incite war, hateful attitudes, hostility, and extremism, nor must they incite violence or the shedding of blood. These tragic realities are the consequence of a deviation from religious teachings. They result from a political manipulation of religions and from interpretations made by religious groups who in the course of history have taken advantage of the power of religious sentiment in the hearts of men and women in order to make them act in a way that has nothing to do with the truth of religion. This is done for the purpose of achieving objectives that are political, economic, worldly, and short-sighted, end of quote. The insight into the political manipulation of religions is something to which we should give special consideration. Such a subversion should not be understood only as referring to non-state actors, namely religious extremists or terrorists, who exploit or politicize religion in order to further their ideologies. Governments must ask themselves to what extent are they really committed to defending religious freedom and to combating persecution based on religion and belief. How many refrain from condoning such acts or even condemn them, yet still collaborate politically, economically, commercially, militarily, or otherwise, or simply by turning a blind eye with some of the most egregious violators of this fundamental freedom? Furthermore, and it would be remiss of me to fail to mention it, there are, as we all know, other forms of religious discrimination and persecution that, while perhaps less radical on the level of physical persecution, are nevertheless detrimental to the full enjoyment of the freedom of religion and the practice or the expression of that conviction, whether in private or in public. I am referring here to a growing tendency, even in established democracies, to criminalize or penalize religious leaders for presenting the basic tenets of their faith, especially regarding the areas of life, marriage, and the family. Moreover, the increased social, cultural, and religious tensions surrounding the perceived conflict of rights with one another, as Pope Francis has noted, and I quote here from his address to the diplomatic corps accredited to the Holy See last year, 2018, has not always helped the promotion of friendly relations between nations, since debatable notions of human rights have been advanced that are at odds with the culture of many countries. The latter feel that they are not respected in their social and cultural traditions. At the same time, it should be recalled that the traditions of individual peoples cannot be invoked as a pretext for disregarding the due respect for the fundamental rights proclaimed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. End of quote. The right to religious freedom is rooted in the very dignity of the human person, and it is not only an achievement of a sound political and juridical culture, but also a condition for the pursuit of truth that does not impose itself by force. In this way, religions can serve as an important factor for unity and peace within the human family, through the reasoned pursuit of the common good, which should be nurtured by dialogue. In this respect, while all means to overcome such persecution should be given support, including the necessity of open and honest intercultural and interreligious dialogue, an even more essential aspect is the indispensable recognition of each and every person as a fellow citizen. With this comes the duty of the state to protect believers of any or no religious conviction because they are equal citizens. In this context, the above-mentioned document on human fraternity underscores the basic dimension of respecting the equal citizenship of all members in a given society, in any particular state. And I quote again from the document. The concept of citizenship is based on the equality of rights and duties under which all enjoy justice. It is therefore crucial to establish in our societies the concepts of full citizenship and reject the discriminatory use of the term minorities, which engenders feelings of isolation and inferiority. Its misuse paves the way for hostility and discord. It undoes any successes and takes away the religious and civil rights of some citizens who are thus discriminated against. End of quote. It is true that the constitutions of a majority of countries affirm that all citizens, regardless of their ethnic, religious belonging, or sex, are equal in rights and duties. However, the resurgence of nationalism in some countries, combined with the aggressive affirmation of religious identity, can easily lead to religious fundamentalism. Persons or groups not belonging to the majority ethnic or religious group may not only face discrimination, but also marginalization and persecution. The citizens belonging to the majority might have the feeling that the state is theirs more than of others who do not belong to that religion. Indeed, as the interim report intimates, in some parts of the world, we are facing levels of persecution that could be considered as a form of genocide, where the presence of Christians is being systematically expunged from societies and cultures, even from the areas of its very origin. Such targeted aggression is not only an attack on the peaceful coexistence founded on religious pluralism, but even more fundamentally upon the essential concept of the equal and inviolable dignity of every human person. The 2nd century Christian theologian Tertullian wrote that the blood of martyrs is the seed of Christians. Motivated by their love of God, the martyrs freely succumbed to a violence that was not self-inflicted, but which came at the hands of their persecutors. Their suffering provides a tremendous example of integrity of conscience and witness to faith, hope, and charity. Maintaining the presence of Christian communities, particularly in those areas where they are not part of the majority group, is much more than symbolic. It is a strong testimony of faith and a witness that peaceful coexistence among a plurality of religions is possible when the dignity of every person is respected. Thank you for your attention.
Would you mind talking with Father Monday? Okay, thank you very much. We're now going to go into our panel discussion with 3 speakers who have first-hand experience of persecution and discrimination of Christians. We're going to start with Cardinal Luis Sacco, who is a Patriarch of the Chaldean Catholic Church. Patriarch Sacco studied here in Rome at the Pontifical Oriental Institute and also at the Sorbonne in Paris before returning to Baghdad and then to Mosul as a parish priest until he was elected Archbishop of Kirkuk. In 2013, he was elected Patriarch and he was created a cardinal by Pope Francis in 2018. And he's been a powerful voice in defense of Christians in Iraq and in the Nineveh Plain. So we're very honored, Your Eminence, that you're here with us this morning.
Thank you so much. First, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to the British ambassador and the embassy at the Holy See for organizing this event to support and defend persecuted Christians in the Middle East. I would also express my thanks to our ambassador, Dr. Amal Musa Hussein, Iraqi ambassador here at the Holy See, for being with us. I am not going to read my text because I have only 5 to 7 minutes. It is sad today to speak about Islamophobia and also Christianophobia. We are now also speaking about Christianophobia in the Middle East and also in Asia. We Christians in Iraq, we are indigenous. We didn't come from outside. We are not migrants. This is our land, and before the arrival of Islam in Mesopotamia, we were majority and well organized, and we helped them because we had at that time schools, hospitals, monasteries, and so on. But today we became just a minority. Iraqi by nature are moderate, but this, sectarian mentality and extremism came from abroad. We never heard before the collapse of the old regime, you are Christian, you are Muslim, we were all living together in a peaceful situation, and also the security was absolute. Maybe there were other things, but the problem was today is confusion, anarchy. Security is not even now. Security has improved, but until now, people are afraid. our praises as Christians, you know, in the Middle East is very important and helpful also to dismantle extremism. And given our qualification, our also open-mindedness, we are helping our brother Muslims to live together peacefully. ISIS and before Al-Qaeda are basing their ideology on 7th century text without any updating, any reforms. They are taking some verses from the Holy Quran or from Hadith literally, without making, you know, a new reading, and also putting the things in their historical and cultural framework, context. I am always telling them, and telling the clergy, Muslim clergy, you have to learn from our Christian experience. We were like you during the Middle Age, but now we did a big process. ISIS is defeated militarily, but ideologically are still strong. Imagine 8 million, mainly Sunni, lived you know, under the control, the occupation of ISIS and ideology during more than 3 years. And now many of them are still living in camps. How to change their mentality? Who can re-educate them, children and others? But normally the idea is still strong. We Christians, we suffered a lot. Others also suffered, Sunni, Shi'i, Kurds, Arabs. But we Christians, we have, you know, our culture and mentality is not violent. We are peaceful people, and we look also for dialogue. After the collapse of the old regime, 1,225 Christians have been killed because they are Christians, not for other reasons. Others, there are reasons to kill each other because there is a struggle for power and money to rule Iraq. But Christians, for what? Because we are only Christians. And 90 churches have been attacked, destroyed or burned in Baghdad, more in Baghdad, but also in other cities, and especially after the occupation of ISIS in Mosul and Nineveh Plain villages. We were about 1 million, before the collapse of the old regime, we were about 1,900,000 people, but now maybe less than 500,000, even we don't have any statistics. This is an estimated number, and many Christians left Iraq for well, or for good. And this is a big loss for Iraqis. Many of them are, they are very well educated, and Christians are an elite. And during the occupation of ISIS, you know, in one night, in Mosul and Nineveh Plain, 120,000 people, Christian people, left only with their clothes. Even they took their documents. And we, as a church, we helped them for housing, eating, and schools in Kurdistan, just to keep them busy and helping. The Iraqi government was incapable to help the refugees because of the corruption. And now the biggest problem of Iraq is, you know, two challenges: corruption and also militias. And militias are very strong everywhere, and they used to have business and money. And sometimes they are stronger than the Iraqi police and army. how to change the situation. I have to suggest some, some ideas. First, the international community should also work and control the persecution all over the area. Just they are also controlling Islamophobia in the West. So we are indigenous, so we have the right to live in peace and dignity. It doesn't matter, I am Christian, I am Muslim, I am Yazidi, and so I am Iraqi. I have the same rights and the same duties also. And personally, I agree with the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Great Britain when he said we have to impose sanctions upon countries or people who are persecuting the others. I think this is a positive idea, but also to help Iraqis, to help Syrians and others, for a democratic regime, and also to make reforms. The constitution should be changed, not based on one sect or on one religion, just like all over the world, and it should be based on citizenship, equality, and justice. And also to reform also the laws, old laws, which is making discrimination between, the citizens, and help. Also, the big challenge, our challenge in Iraq, is how to keep Christians in Iraq, keep them busy and hoping. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence. I'd now like to introduce Father Bonnie Mendes, who is the Catholic priest of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Faisalabad in Pakistan, and he has served as Executive Secretary for the National Commission for Justice and Peace, and he's served on the Punjab Peace Network and Caritas for Asia, and he's won awards for his work promoting peace and interreligious harmony. Father Bonnie.
Your Eminence, Your Excellencies, Reverend Fathers, Sisters, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin first of all congratulating England. We are a cricket-crazy nation, and they won the World Cup after a long wait of 42 years. But we have been waiting for more than 42 years that Her Majesty's government would pay attention to the persecution of Christians in Pakistan. That is happening today, and they deserve congratulations for that, because this was our desire. We have been pushing for it for a long time, but it never happened. But it has happened at last, and we can now hope that we can go forward with this attention. The fact is that we, as His Eminence has mentioned, we also are the people of the soil. We didn't migrate from anywhere else. Others have migrated to where Pakistan is, and today they are dominating. And we, who are the people of the soil, have been disenfranchised in many, many ways. The Constitution itself is the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. The head of the state has to be a Muslim. The Prime Minister has to be a Muslim. The oath that you take is taken on the finality of the Prophet. So this is where we stand. And it's not merely the Constitution, but the penal laws have been framed in such a way that they all have to be in line with the Quran and the Sunnah. That is where we stand today. And the blasphemy law, as you mentioned, this is one of the most dangerous laws, but we've been protesting it for many, many years, especially at the time of the military dictator Zia-ul-Haq, but nothing happened. today you can see its effect. Just a few days ago, a cricket match, one of the boys is supposed to have brought a bag to play. I can't imagine a Christian boy bringing a bag, and that had Islamic literature against the Prophet, and that he is being accused of blasphemy. I don't know whether the police will accept that, but the fact is that there is so much pressure on the police when such a very claim has been made, and such speeches have been made. I have this document, the religious minorities in Pakistan. This is done by the Catholic Commission, National Commission for Justice and Peace. This is religious, and this is another document of freedom. This is about our schools. Then it's not merely the church. There's another document come out, The Silence of the Lamb. It's done by a very modern group, People's Commission for Minority Rights. You can find it in the website www.pcmr.pk. The Silence of the Lamb. It's talking about forced persecution, forced conversions. Forced conversion is a big issue, and it's common all over. And today, what we have is a girl is kidnapped, she's raped, and then they say she has converted to Islam and therefore nothing can be done. This is where we stand. Whether it's a Hindu girl or whether it's a Christian girl, if they are kidnapped, you can be quite sure that it will be very, very hard to get her back. We try very hard, we protest, we try to get her back, but then once she's converted to Islam, they want her to live as a Muslim. But there are others that are very independent. If you think I'm talking only of the church, I mentioned the People's Commission for Minority Rights, which has Hindus, Buddhists, Parsis, Muslims as well in that group. They also have published this. But now here is a group, Irada. This has published Hate Speeches versus Free Speech. These are sort of documents that are coming out that are independent, not merely of the church or of any churches. These are independent groups coming out and publishing and speaking up. Marginalization of the Christians. You mentioned in the recommendations that the economic discrimination. I'd like to mention to you that social discrimination is very strong. Political discrimination exists. And there is where we have to address ourselves. And therefore, when the British government for many, many years was giving funds for education, they refused to help our schools, especially the schools for the poor, the hospitals for the poor. They refused to help. They said these are Christian institutions, whereas they do help the Islamic groups. And those groups getting help, they are diverting the funds again for what? Terrorism. So we would like to point out this, that it's time that the government looks at its own funding, its own sources. Where is it spending its money? Where is it investing itself in Pakistan? This is what we like to point out. Look, we in Pakistan want you to be very, very neutral, help us to be equal citizens, to be citizens that can really contribute to the nation. And we have done much in the field of education in the past. Especially anybody you think of, from prime ministers to ministers, many of them have been educated in our schools and colleges. That level has gone down. We're trying very hard to maintain what we did in the past, but we need your help. And we ask you then now to really, sincerely, that you come up now with this, looking at persecution of Christians in Pakistan, to help us really play our role as equal citizens and contributing to the nation and to the worldwide community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father Bonnie. Now I'd like to introduce Sister Monica Chikwe, who is a Nigerian hospitality sister of mercy. She's a member of Renata, which is the Religious in Europe Networking Against Trafficking and Exploitation, and many of you will know her for her work as co-founder of Slaves No More, and her work at the Counter-Trafficking Office of the Union of Major Superiors General in Rome. But today she's going to talk to us about something slightly different, which is the situation of Christians in her home country, Nigeria. Sister Monica.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm really honored to be here to talk about the situation of Christians in Nigeria, though time doesn't permit for elaborate text, but I will just give a flash. Religious issues all over the world are complicated, even as they are important. I'm not here today to advance an existing controversy. I'm not here to give you facts that you do not have already. Rather, I have come to emphasize on what is obvious, and perhaps together we may find a common solution. Most of the religious conflicts in Nigeria have their root causes in ignorance, illiteracy, ethnicity, and poverty. Most of the people in Nigeria are illiterate and poor with no formal education in most cases. And religious studies are based on doctrines aiming at violence and killing of people in the name of God. Those citizens who believe and join are assured that after committing the necessary action, their families will get money, while those people themselves will obtain a heavenly reward. Many other factors like corruption, failure of justice in Nigeria, ethnicity, lack of effective security, and a host of others contribute in creating tension, intolerance, and persecution of Christians in Nigeria. What are the situations? From most available statistics, Nigeria is among the first 10 most populated nations in the world, among the first 10 Islamic nations in the world, and equally among the first 10 most Christian nations in the world. Nigeria is the only country in the world to belong to this classification. A quick search using the Wikipedia in the internet shows that in 2017, 78 million Christians and 77 million Muslims in Nigeria, that is about 49%, 49.3% and 48.8% of the entire population, and also when other religions are considered. Nigeria has about 250 ethnic groups and over 300 indigenous languages. All these ethnic nationalities were brought together by fiat under the colonial rule to be one country. Ethnic conflict reinforces religious conflict as a result of intolerance and inadequate relationship between ethnic nationalities within the country. Religious crisis in Nigeria is prevalent, and there are a number of reasons or factors that triggers them. One, the theological factor. Religious involves specific intellectual belief. Each religion has her own doctrines and literature considered to be sacred. Lack of in-depth understanding, outright ignorance, misinterpretation, or sheer mischief of religious texts and doctrines have given rise to conflict. In communication, one can speak more than one language. One can have dual nationality, but one cannot genuinely be a Muslim and at the same time a Christian. Religious intolerance is a blind attitude, a narrow approach, a rigid arrogance towards others who are different. Such negative attitudes consequently manifest themselves in violence. The inability to recognize and accommodate views and opinions of others is therefore one of the major sources of religious violence and persecution in Nigeria. Since religion is an essential and integral part of culture, any religious violence can easily spill over the political and economic lives of the citizen. Another factor is another reason of religious persecution. In April 2014, all of us know about the story of 276 girls taken from the secondary school in Chibok. These girls, most of these girls may have been sold in slavery or raped and forced to marry the jihadists. Boko Haram and of recent, the Fulani herdsmen have destroyed countless churches, homes, and government buildings and have closed down many schools by force. The group have killed and harmed people for being non-believers, including prominent religious leaders. Some of the most affected are girls and women who have been abducted and subjected to forced marriage, forced conversion, sexual abuse, and torture. The insurgence of the Fulani herdsmen is a very huge issue as it is reaching its alarming stage with no lasting solution. In fact, there is a globalized indifference and silence around an issue that is ravaging lives, destroying properties, and displacing people. The most fearful aspect of the whole phenomenon is that while Christians are being killed every day, our government is busy debating about grazing ground for cows, as if the country now value cows more than human life. Since the year 2000, about 13,000 churches have been burnt and about 11,500 Christians killed, and many are displaced. Christians all over Nigeria are suffering persecution in different capacities and forms, which are similar to what John Allen has cited elsewhere, such as social discrimination, such as pressure on a Christian woman to convert to Islam if she marries a Muslim, institutional discrimination, such as difficulties in obtaining building permits to Catholic churches in some parts of the country, employment, legal discrimination, suppression of Christians, community suppression when entire churches are being burnt and faithful killed. Also, our press is not helping matters. Many a times, they treat sensitive issues that instigate violence and persecution, especially between the two religions, Muslim and Christianity. Poverty with high level of unemployment is also an issue. Well, time doesn't permit. Let me go straight away to what the international body can do. We have anti-corruption can be a step to be taken by the international body. One of the major problems in Nigeria today leading to religious violence is corruption. Most of the wealth of Nigeria and other developing countries are looted and carried away to foreign countries. Any successful anti-corruption efforts today requires an effective coalition. The politicians, senior government officials, the private sector, citizens, communities, NGOs, and civil society all over the world, especially of the developed countries, need to come into this coalition. The latest advanced technology are needed to capture, analyze, and share data to prevent and to suppress corrupt behaviors. Fight against terrorism can be another intervention of the community, the international community. Most of the religious violence in Nigeria are terrorist acts. The pressure of modern communication and transportation has provided opportunities for violent organizations to learn from each other, to communicate with members of other countries, and importing and exchanging information. And many times, they import also terrorists to come and attack. The international community has a responsibility to, the Nigerian government, is a member of the International United Nations. Therefore, they are member of the they signed the International Convention on Combating Terrorism. Nigeria has signed many of these conventions. The international community has the responsibility to hold Nigerian government accountable if the Nigerian government is unwilling or unable to combat terrorism. The international community is therefore bound to provide assistance. The ability to prevent terrorism crimes depend on the extensive and close international contact, which may include the cooperation between the security and intelligence service of various countries. Another aspect that the international body can intervene is on the human rights. In line with their international obligation, the international community should explicitly prohibit the recruitment and the use of children in hostility by armed groups. The international body can also help in ensuring the implementation of the universal rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Monica. Now, we are going to have a few questions, but just before we do that, because we're being live streamed to London, I'm going to hand over a copy of the report to Monsignor Camilleri. Okay, I think we now have time for a few questions and discussion. So I'm going to open up the floor. I don't know if we have a microphone. Do we, Simona? Yeah, okay. Are there any comments? I know we have a lot of experts in the audience. So in fact, I wanted to ask Signor Monteduro perhaps to comment first, but I can't see him. Oh, there he is. Could we go first to Alessandro Monteduro? From Aid to the Church in Need.
Thank you for this honor, first of all. Let me express three short things. First of all, my gratitude, the gratitude of Aid to the Church in Need about this independent and important report, and also the gratitude because Aid to the Church in Need has been involved in the arrangement of this denounce. It isn't a detail, it's for all of us, for our brothers in the faith, suffering persecution, a sign of hope. But about sign of hope, and this is the second thing. Today, and also in the report, but in all the review report prepared by the charities, by also the Department of State of USA, there is always the denounce. But it's also important to say something through also these important speakers about the reaction. How is it possible to help Christians persecuted all over the world, above all in the Middle East? Because Aid to the Church in Need, for instance, evaluate like isn't sufficient the answer or the reaction on the military ground. It's absolutely, really essential to find another reaction. The third thing, and so about this reaction by His Eminence, maybe by Patriarch Sacco, we can receive an answer, some information. But the third thing, in the same review, there is a clear denounce about the fear for the European government in the same denounce, like there is fear to damage the bilateral relationship, and there is also a criticize about the politically correct. And so my question is, but to inform, to storytell, to denounce the persecution against Christians is politically incorrect, and why? Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like just to take a few more comments and questions from the floor, and then I'll come back to the panel. The Ambassador of Belgium, I see.
Thank you, dear Sally, for organizing this interesting session on the issue of persecution of Christians. I have a specific question on China, because all the information we get point to a severe intensification of persecution against Christians, going from destruction of churches, removal of crosses, interdiction for children to attend religion lessons. I would be very interested to know, to have an assessment on this specific issue by the report, and also, if it's possible, by the Holy See. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Father Musi? Can I ask you to keep your questions short, because we've got very little time and we need some answers as well.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, I am a priest from Eritrea, and this time my church, the Catholic Church, is under state persecution. At the same time, not only the Catholic Church, even the Orthodox Church, the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church of Eritrea is under house arrest for these last 14 years. The same persecution against the minority Pentecostal group, Baptist and Jehovah's Witness, even from Islam groups, those from Shia or from other minorities. Still, all this group is persecuted by the state, not by terrorist group or by others. So how to address this kind of problem? The European Union or the United Nations, the Holy See, how can challenge this situation? Thank you.
Thank you. And the Ambassador of Iraq?
Thank you very much for the British Embassy to arrange this session, and welcome for His Eminence Sako, the Cardinal Sako of Iraq. Thank you very much to give me the chance to give a few remarks about Iraq. It is not a question. May somebody among us don't know much about Iraq. Our society consists of a lot of diversity from ethnic point of view and from religious point of view. We are Arab and Kurd and Turkmen and a few very small groups like Shabak and other. And we are Muslims, Christians, IZD, Sab 8 and other small groups like the KKs and other. We live all with much of peace, love, fraternity, and in a great amount of harmony for long years, for hundreds of years. And in the last decade, from outside, like what His Eminence said, terrorists come to Iraq with ideology of extremity. And they try to kill people under the name of religion, for example. Basically, they were named Qaeda, then IS, which they don't deserve the name Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. They are non-Muslim and not a state. They are a group of criminals, try to kill others under different name. And their victim wasn't only the Christian. Everybody knows that most of the victims were IZDs, the Nadia Murad and other ladies who were tortured under the name of being not Muslim. And also the Muslims are among the victims under the name, you are Shiite, I am Sunnite. Then the Sunnite themselves become also victims because they killed a lot of Sunnite just because they carry idea not like their ideas, and they didn't give hand with them to kill others. The government and the Iraqi people, they are against this group. They were against it, and they fight it. Not only the armed forces in Iraq, but volunteers from all these groups, ethnic and religious groups, under the name of Hashd. different names, Hajj Ashari, Hajj Sha'bi, a lot of names, but they are volunteers. They fight with them for 4 years with a lot of sacrifices until the success and they get rid of ISIS. But of course, there are some foci, some groups here and there, and they continue to torture the people. Among them are the Christians, because they torture even the Muslims and try to do a lot of bad things for them. The government start to solve the problem. We have two problems. One of them is that the area even liberated, but it is completely destroyed. The people cannot go back because there are no homes, no hospital, no schools, nothing, no infrastructure. So first of all, they did the conference, famous conference in Kuwait to rebuild the liberated area, in which participate a lot of our friendly country, and we are thankful for them. But you know, it is not a matter of money, it is a matter also of time to rebuild the area. And here the role of the international society, they can help to convince the people not to leave Iraq by rebuilding their cities. And the second, they create a law which is called the Terrorism Encountering Law, which has articles very severe in punishing the people who participate in this terrorist action. And it is very famous law, and it is done. Of course, as he said, there are some people who did problems, and there are some corruption here and there, but the government has another committee for countering for integrity, which is countering the corruption. And we as a government and society trying our best to control the situation. And I want to say the last word, I know the time, that all of us should put a hand with a hand to be against persecution and to help each other. And every human being should have the same rights, same duty, without paying attention whether he is belonging to a minority or to a majority, just because he is a human being. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We are practically out of time, so I'm going to slightly unfairly ask Monsignor Camilleri to reply. The two specific countries raised were China and Eritrea. On China, I should just say it is covered in the report, and the pressure on Christian churches, I think, to register and to be subject to state control is covered, and the problems that creates for freedom of conscience. And Eritrea, I don't think I mentioned Eritrea, but Eritrea is also mentioned as a place where nearly 3,000 Christians are in prison, and I think if you're not one of the approved churches, then people suffer enormous persecution. The question which you've raised, Father Musi, about how to respond to that is the difficult one, how to influence the treatment that those Christians receive. But Monsignor Camilleri, with apologies, I wonder if you want to comment on either of those.
I will comment on all cases of religious persecution. In the sense, I will not be going into the specific cases also, because I would need a lot of time if I were to describe all that is known and is being done on either case. But I think it is very important to say that, first of all, the Holy See follows on a daily basis whatever is happening in those countries where there are episodes of religious discrimination, religious persecution. We keep ourselves updated with everything that is happening as far as is humanly possible. And as you know, normally the Holy See, when it acts on these situations, it tries doing that in a very discreet manner in order not to jeopardize any further the situation of the local church and of the Christians on the ground. Naturally, the fact that perhaps what the Holy See does not feature on the headlines, so to speak, on news agencies and media, doesn't mean that nothing is being done. Actually, we do our best in order to try, first of all, to try and understand what exactly is happening on the ground. Secondly, what can be done in order to improve the situation or solve the problem. What is very important, I think, is that we have to avail ourselves also of a relationship that already exists with the authorities, a relationship of knowledge, of mutual knowledge, reciprocal knowledge and trust, in order to be able to obtain the best results, so to speak, out of our interventions. We are under no illusion that this is a very difficult process, but this does not mean that we give up on trying, and as I said, we do this on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsignor Camilleri. I'm going to draw the event to a close now because we said we would finish at 12:15. I just want to make a couple of concluding remarks. The report itself was independent, and if you read it, I mean, it is critical of the way we have dealt with this issue in the past, constructively critical, I think, and the point of it was to shine a light on how we as the British government stand up when persecutions are being Christians are being persecuted, and to try and improve our response to that. So it's in that spirit that the report has been done, and we as a government will now, as a Foreign Office, will take it away and will study the conclusions and implement them. I think this discussion has also been independent, and we've heard some comments critical of the British government here too, for which I thank our speakers. But it's important that we talk about this openly, and it's not meant to be a finger-pointing exercise, but it is meant that we can speak openly about what the situation of Christians, and also about our policy response, which has clearly not always been effective because persecution of Christians is such a widespread phenomenon. So I think today we've shone a little bit of a light on the issue. I think the report does that even more, and I commend it to you and commend you to read it. And for us, it's the beginning of a road. We will look at all the recommendations, and as I said, I believe the Foreign Secretary has undertaken to implementing them all. So that's something the Foreign Office is going to be taking away and doing. And in doing that, we very much value our collaboration with the Holy See, with the expertise that the Holy See has, and that the community here has, represented by many of you in the audience, that you know firsthand what is happening in your home countries. So I wanted just to thank you, to thank our speakers, Cardinal Sacco, Father Boni, Sister Monica, to thank Don Angelo for letting us hold this in this beautiful church, and Monsignor Camilleri for your support. And to say that this is an issue, this is the start of an increased focus on this issue, and one in which we look forward to working with you all in the years to come. So thank you very much. Hold on. Cardinal Sacco is going to say one final word.
Just to answer to Alessandro, we all should work to end persecution of all religion. This should be our mission. We don't have to kill someone because he is different of religion. This is really a shame. The second thing, the document signed by the Pope and at Azhar, I hope, when the Pope will come to Iraq, he will sign a new document or the same document with Shi'i authority.